We are halfway through a mini-series on the 3 tenets of Westminster's mission statement. Love God, make friends, serve others. Last week we tackled love God, and today we're on the second tenet, make friends, which I have to say, of all the various church mission statements I've seen, this one understates fellowship possibly more than any other church I've seen out there. Because when you say the term make friends, that could either mean make your best friend in the world or go chit-chat at a dinner party and catch up on the latest scores from the game you missed. And make friends covers all of those. The truth is, when the church talks about making friends, it's a lot more specific. It is talking about a particular element of Christianity. The Greek word for it is koinonia. Koinonia. Koinonia is used a few times in the New Testament, and one of the first times it's used is in the scripture passage for today from Acts 2. So if we want to pull up Acts 2, this is the passage from right after Pentecost. So the Holy Spirit has come, has enlivened Peter to go out and preach the good news. All these people are hearing it. They're turning. This is the beginning of the church, and so they're coming to God. They're turning their lives over. And Peter preaches the sermon, and 3,000 come to faith. And then this is what happens immediately after that. Do we have Acts 2? I've got it on my phone if we don't. There we go. That's not the right passage. That's probably my fault. Okay, so we're at Acts 2, verses 42. Yeah, no, that's, okay. Ignore what's on the screen and just listen to me. So, this is what happened right after all those people came to faith. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. That word fellowship, that's the koinonia I told you about, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed together by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Do you hear how that's a bit different from making a casual acquaintance at a dinner party? When we're talking about koinonia, we're talking about community, we're talking about a much more substantial level of relationship that is being formed. And what you see in the whole premise behind this concept is a basic truth that unfortunately we've forgotten in our culture. And the basic truth is this: humans were not meant to do life alone. Humans were not meant to do life alone. Humans were created to be in community with each other. We're created to be social creatures. We unfortunately have come to a point in our culture where we kind of think that's not true, or at least it's not true to the extent that it is. In the 1960s, they did a group of researchers, medical researchers, did a study. It's called the Rosetto Study. You should go home and Google it if you are interested in actually reading the details of it. But what they did is they saw a community called Rosetto. And in this community, they found lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of other kinds of disease, lower rates of cancer, lower rates of all these kind of health issues. They also saw lower rates of welfare, lower rates of the criminal justice system. Basically, this looked like the ideal community where human life was flourishing and people weren't getting sick. And so these medical researchers went in and they wanted to find out what caused that. So they looked at diet, they looked at exercise, they looked at all of these different factors. Age, they looked at behavior and job and all these things. And they compared all these factors and they couldn't find anything. They couldn't find anything. The only thing they eventually found was that what made this community different from the communities around them was that it was a traditional immigrant community from Italy. And like other traditional immigrant communities from Italy, they kept their old world habits. Habits like they had multiple generations living in the same household. They all went to the same church. They all went to the same schools. They had no fences. It was kind of this community where everyone raised everyone's kids the way they used to in traditional communities growing up. The communities were so socially cohesive that there were traditional foods. Everyone ate the same food on the night. So on like some Monday night was like meatball night. Everyone had it. The whole community had a level of social cohesion that used to be normal in traditional societies, but in our society is abnormal. And the only thing they could find that was different about this community was that they functioned the way communities used to function. And in this medical research paper published in a medical journal, and the conclusion of it is this line that gives me chills every time I read it, which is, it seems to be that people are nourished by people. It seems to be that people are nourished by other people. Christianity teaches the same thing. Christianity says it this way: it is not good for man to be alone. It is not good for humans to be alone. We were not created to do life alone. You know those researchers? They said if this theory is true, if this hypothesis is true, then if we wait 20, 30 years, we will see the children of these immigrants begin to develop American diseases the more they assimilate into American culture. And you know what happened? As the generation went down, the kids lived in bigger houses, built bigger fences, put in bigger TVs, spent more time alone and less time with the community, spent more time spending and less time giving, came down to the level of isolation that is now normal for American communities, and you know what happened? They started to look exactly, the health statistics of that community began to mirror the health statistics of the United States in general. The more the behavior of the community changed, the more the bodies of the people within it were affected. If that surprises you, it's because you have never wrestled deeply with the Christian idea of community. If that surprises you, it's because you've bought into the lie our culture tells us that you can do life alone and be happy. If that surprises you, it means you've never taken seriously this deep idea of koinonia that weaves its way through the Bible as not only a gift, but as an essential part of the restoration God has for his people who are desperately lonely and need not only a relationship with God, but need to be brought back into a relationship with each other. You see, the thing is, the first truth is that we humans were not meant to do life alone. The second truth is this: we keep trying to. We keep trying to. And the only reason that the American culture is the first one to have developed all the diseases that come from trying to do life alone is that we're the first ones who've had the ability to do it. Before, there was not the level of abundance. There was not the level of material prosperity. There was not the electronics. There was not all the things that we have that enable us to choose to live life alone have enabled us to destroy ourselves through loneliness. And there is something within the human person that even though we were created for life together, make us try to do life alone. So when I was in college, I spent 3 months in rural Nicaragua, living with no electricity in a kind of open air dwelling place. We had no communication. I had very little running water. It was comfortable, but it was not first world. And every night, because it was the first time in my life that I hadn't had a TV, didn't have anything, didn't even have lights. Every night, the choices were to sit in your room with a candle or to go down and sit around the table with all of the other people working at the organization I was volunteering at and play Uno and talk about the day, right? Those were our only two choices. And you know what? If you get lonely enough, Uno sounds pretty great. And so, of course, we spent our evenings gathered around a candlelit table, playing Uno, and the kids of the village would come on by because everything's within walking distance, and so they'd wander in and out from house to house, and we'd talk about the day, and we'd talk about life, and we'd solve the problems of the world. And then I got back to the United States. And you know what? With electricity come a whole lot more options of things to do with your evening. And what has happened in American culture is we have developed fake community. And here's what that means. There is something within the human person that knows we need community, right? It's loneliness. There's something within the human person that pushes us toward each other. That instinct that made me go from my room downstairs to that table in Nicaragua. What we have done in the American culture is we have created a world that is busy enough and that is loud enough that we can satisfy the need within us without actually giving us the nourishment of community. Are you with me? So what I might do in the United States is instead of going down to that table to talk, I might just scroll through my Facebook feed. For millennials, that's called Snapchat, right? I might just scroll through social media, and that quenches my loneliness, but does it actually connect me to other people? You hear what I'm saying? If I am in the United States today, instead of going down and sitting at that table, I might turn on one of a million TV shows in which billions of dollars have been invested to keep my attention. And you know what? That will quench my loneliness, but does it actually nourish me? Of course not. Of course not. I saw a news article. I kid you not. You can't make this stuff up. I saw a news article that they are offering counseling services for people who are suffering from PTSD from Game of Thrones. You can't make this up, people. Talk about a first world problem. But that is what we have done. This is the society in which we live. This is the culture in which we live. The truth is, you can turn on your television, and it is so well produced and so well created that you can be engaged to the point that the loneliness within you is assuaged, but everything you're invested in is fake. Right? It's fiction. Oh, for those of you who don't know, Game of Thrones is fiction. Just so we're on the same page about it. It's fiction. It's not real. It's not real. And so it quenches the symptom that is supposed to push us toward other people, while at the same time starving us of the community that we actually need. Here's my image. It's like eating a flaming hot Dorito. It's so exciting, it's so powerful, it's so intense, and it gives you nothing. And then, when you finally do decide to leave and go to the table to play Uno, it's like eating a piece of cheddar cheese. And you compare a piece of cheddar cheese to a flaming hot Dorito, and it's boring. It's bland. But you know what? It's nourishing. It's nourishing. Your soul needs the nourishment of people to live. And you can try to assuage it with TV, with social media. You can use your work. You can use a million different options that are available in our culture to make the loneliness within you not hurt as much. But when you do it that way, it's like eating Doritos when what your body needs is cheese. Here's the thing. You were created for community. And whatever you try to do, you will not be the person you were meant to be until you live into it. Because if we're going in fundamental points, if the first fundamental point is we're created to do life together, second fundamental point is we try not to, the third point is this: community changes the world. It doesn't just change you, it changes the world. And a spoiler alert, for this entire series, the third point is XYZ changes the world. Because the church is in the business of changing the world, right? The church's mission is fundamentally to transform the world through making disciples of Jesus Christ. And we do that through discipleship, through community, and through service. And so all of those things are not just to make us happy or not just to make us a better church. All of those things are for the purpose of transforming the world, because what happens with community is when people find each other, when people begin to be nourished by each other, when people begin to actually come together in koinonia, in community, it becomes bigger than just them. And instead of wasting their time binge watching Netflix, they become transformative agents in their community to show and embody grace to a world that desperately needs grace. As you look across human history, whenever people have really started experimenting with what community means, the world has been changed. Whenever people start living together, start sharing life together, start engaging in the kind of relationships that actually change our souls, the world has been changed. If any of you have ever done Emmaus, you know part of the reason that experience is so powerful is that it's 72 hours of community. And if you've grown up in the United States, you probably have never experienced community of that level before. For the Methodist perspective, one of the reasons that we exist today is because Methodists believed in community. So back, a short history lesson, 18th century, since I know all of you love the 18th century. It's like your favorite time period ever. There was a revival going on. And there were all these preachers going around, and these preachers were getting huge crowds, 20,000, 30,000. This is before microphones, and so they would preach and they would say something and people would pass it back. And all of these extraordinary preachers were going around the Americas and going around England, and this extraordinary revival was happening. One of those preachers was John Wesley. John Wesley was not considered to be the best preacher. He had good sermons, he had solid sermons, but he was not nearly as charismatic as some of these preachers that went out there who were trained in theater and who could draw bigger crowds and have them stay for longer and have a bigger turnout. But here's what Wesley did that was different. Whenever people came to hear his sermon, he sent them to join something called a class meeting. And at that class meeting, they went every week, and they met with a group of people, and there were 25 questions that they asked, but the biggest question was this: how is it with your soul? How is it with your soul? And meeting weekly with other human beings to answer the question, how is it with your soul, created a movement that gave birth to millions upon millions upon millions of spiritual Christians, of spiritual heirs of that movement. So that if you look at it historically today, all of those preachers that had big crowds are forgotten. And not only forgotten, they didn't leave a mark. There was nothing left. They had a great sermon and it was over. And people had a great experience and it was over. The transformation happened when people came together with each other to do the kind of soul work that creates community, because through that community, the world has changed. Here's my question for you. How many soul friends do you have? And when I say soul friends, I mean somebody that you can actually answer the question, how is it with your soul? How many of those friends do you have? Here's another way of phrasing it. How many 2 a.m. friends do you have? When your life falls apart and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, who can you call? And you know that they're going to have your back no matter what. How many of those friends do you have? The mission of Westminster is that this time next year, whatever that number is, this time next year you'll have more. Because those friendships, those relationships, that community changes the world. Would you join me in prayer? Gracious God, we come before you as a people who acknowledge that you have drawn us toward each other, that you have created us to live together in community with each other and in community with you. And we come before you also as a people who are confessing the many ways that we have refused that call. For the times we have settled for something fake, forgive us. for the times we have shunned the vulnerability required. Forgive us. For the times we have settled for small talk instead of delving into soul talk. Forgive us. God, give us the hearts to be drawn toward each other and to be drawn toward you, that the koinonia of Westminster might change this corner of the world. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.